An undying spirit. More immigrants are arriving in Lampedusa days after deadly tragedy killed hundreds. Egyptians, on the other hand, have ignored protest calls in favor of having a peaceful Eid. And we will also be covering a delicate balancing act. The DR Congo's Joseph Kabila is pledging action to restore his government's glory and authority. Hello there, welcome to Africa Live, CCTV's new program that brings you African and global news from all perspectives. I'm Raman Yang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Here's what's coming up in the next half hour. Somalia's president is calling on Barclays to reverse its decision to close its remittance account. A court decision is expected on Tuesday. And we'll also be focusing on the road to Brazil. Ghana and Egypt are contesting the first leg of the World Cup qualifier playoff in Kumasi on Tuesday. Let's start, however, away from Africa's shores, where a migrant boat carrying 137 people reached Italy from North Africa on Monday. The boat's arrival in the southern island of Lampedusa essentially shows that many migrants are still prepared to make the perilous journey across the Mediterranean. This month alone, hundreds have drowned while making the exact same trip. CCTV's Kate Parkinson reports from the island of Lampedusa.
The tiny island of Lampedusa has been a stepping stone for migrants heading to Europe for 2 decades now. Tens of thousands have made the crossing from Africa so far this year. Many hundreds have been killed along the way. In one of the worst incidents in living history, more than 350 people drowned last week when their boat capsized just off the coast. Their coffins are now being taken to Sicily for burial. For some, there is a chance to say goodbye to their loved ones. But many victims have not been identified. Just a number on a coffin, heading off to an unmarked grave. And yet, despite the dangers, the flimsy, overcrowded boats, migrants continue to come.
When a person is in his own country, he cannot live freely, cannot speak freely. He is always suffering, especially the young people. They are really suffering. That is why they try to escape. In order to save their lives, they risk their life to save their life. That's why they come here.
This boat cemetery sums up just how big the migrant problem is here in Lampedusa. Every single one of these boats arrived on the island carrying migrants on a journey that they hoped would bring them to a better life. And despite these recent disasters, the boats continue to arrive. Pressure is now mounting on the European Union to review its immigration policy and to tackle mass immigration, both legal and illegal. It's also hoped that the EU can launch a rescue mission across the entire Mediterranean to try and stop these tragedies before they happen. Immigration will likely top the agenda when the European Council meets later this month, but any changes in policy will be too late for many. Kate Parkinson, CCTV, Lampedusa in Italy.
Let's look at the numbers as far as illegal immigration is concerned. It is quite the big business for human traffickers. It costs about $700 to be smuggled along Morocco's coastline over to Spain and nearly $3,000 to get to Italy from West Africa through Libya and right across the Mediterranean. But that journey is highly dangerous, and we've just seen many don't make it to their destination. Just last week, 350 people drowned when their boat capsized off the Italian coastline. On Friday, at least 24 more immigrants, including children, perished on the boat carrying 250 passengers, sunk near the Italian island of Lampedusa. Malta, which sees up to 200 immigrants coming in every week, launched a joint rescue operation with Italian authorities that saved 221 people. Now, Spain has recorded 490 deaths since the start of the year, and that's based on the number of bodies recovered from the sea. The Red Cross, on the other hand, estimates that there have been as many as 3,000 deaths in total so far. Elsewhere, as France and South Africa do agree on the need for urgent intervention in the Central African Republic, Ethiopia's Prime Minister, Haile Mariam Desalegn, has also called for urgent action. Speaking exclusively to CCTV, he echoed France's concerns that the crisis in the Central African Republic could have negative ripple effects throughout the region and the continent as a whole.
What sort of regional impact the trouble there have in as far as you're concerned?
The impact is huge because, there are problems in the neighborhood where it's very easy for extremists and terrorists to infiltrate into that country because of the regional situation, in different directions, including Islamic extremism might infiltrate in that area. That might complicate the whole thing, and it becomes even more dangerous. So we have to act very quickly in that area. Not only terrorist infiltration, but also even those who are on the ground from the armed struggling groups. The human rights violation is very critical. So that also necessitates, a quick response in that country.
Are you really surprised or disappointed by Ms. Michel Djitodia, who is the rebel leader at the moment in Central African Republic, that he was not able to stabilize the country as he promised before?
Well, I do not exactly know their chemistry inside the rebel groups, but the fact is that on the ground he's not able to do so. So I think that's a fragile, rebel group. So that shows that there is a leadership failure and disunity within the opposing groups as well.
The former president of the country, Mr. Francois Bozize, is in exile still. Really, what kind of role the African Union wants Mr. Francois Bozize to play in this particular juncture in the country?
I think the focus should be on the people rather than on individuals at this time. So we have to bring the same, proper transition in that country, and the people has to decide on the fate of this country in a democratic fashion. So what I feel is, as it is used to be in many countries, what's important is not individual leaders that are, at the helm of this or that organization. What's important is the people has to be given a chance to demonstrate their will in a free and fair manner so that they can establish their own country. That support should be given by the African Union at this time by pacifying the country.
8 minutes into the hour, let's take our first break. Here's what's coming up next. We'll be live in Egypt shortly, where Egyptians have ignored protest calls in favor of peaceful Eid celebrations. We'll also be examining the delicate balancing act in the DRC, where Joseph Kabila is pledging to take action to restore his government's authority and law. Welcome back. Calls by the Muslim Brotherhood for widespread protests appear to have gone unanswered as Egyptians celebrate the start of the 10-day Eid holiday period. Now, thousands gathered at popular venues in Cairo for morning prayers with no reports of any violent incidents. Now, while yet to be resolved, political troubles in the North African state seem to have been momentarily forgotten as people started to celebrate Eid. Residents lined one of Cairo's main streets enjoying the entertainment on offer after morning prayer. Security does continue to be relatively heavy as the Muslim Brotherhood maintain they intend to continue demonstrating despite low turnout at their rallies. Here's what some Egyptians on the streets of Cairo had to say.
We have got to take care of Egypt to make the future situation better.
I want to greet the Egyptian army and thank them for all they're doing for Egypt. And if we as Egyptians say no to terrorism, the future will be better.
Thanks to Sisi and the Egyptian army. I am wishing all Egyptians a happy Eid and that the situation in the country improves.
All Egyptians need to talk about the political situation and we need power to fight any foreign threats.
Let's get some more details on the ground. CCTV's Famida Miller joins us now live from the Egyptian capital of Cairo. Famida, we're seeing very little reports on this end of any reports of violence in Egypt's major cities. What's your assessment of the situation?
Oh, good afternoon, Rama. While looking at events across Cairo, there certainly have been fewer instances of violence, actually none at all in the last 72 hours, as well as a more festive atmosphere around the city as people here celebrate the Muslim festival of Eid. The emphasis really has been on being with family, celebrating that festival, the end of the Hajj period. And also what we've seen across the city is a significant military presence, of course blocking off strategic areas in the city where previously demonstrators had gathered or at least tried to get to. And that would include the Tahrir Square as well as Rabah and the Mustafa Mosque, where it was said earlier that possibly Muslim Brotherhood members could protest. And that, of course, is still wanting the ousted president Mohamed Morsi. They want him returned to office, and this is why they continue those protests. But essentially, the mood here has been one of festivity and wanting the Eid celebrations to go off without a hitch. Going out to some of the areas in Cairo early in the morning when those prayers took place, speaking to many people, when asking them how they felt about Eid specifically, all those questions were answered with responses about thanking the army for the role they've played in keeping peace in Cairo, thanking General Sisi for the role that he's played, and always focus on the political situation and wanting a continued peace over this period.
Indeed. We'll have to leave it there for the time being. Thank you very much for that update. That's CCTV's Famida Miller live in the Egyptian capital of Cairo with the latest developments in the North African states. Now, on to a quick run of other news making headlines across Africa. Let's start with a alleged senior al-Qaeda figure captured in Libya by U.S. Special Forces earlier this month. He has been transferred to the United States and will now face charges in court in New York. The Libyan national, Nazi al-Raghi, better known by the name Abu Anas al-Libi, is a suspect in the 1998 bombings of the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. 224 civilians were killed in those attacks. Al-Libi was seized by a U.S. Delta Force squad on the streets of Tripoli on the 5th of October. It was not immediately known, however, if Al-Libi cooperated with U.S. interrogators. He's expected to appear before a judge later on Tuesday. Elsewhere, the UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon has condemned the attack on an African Union United Nations convoy in Darfur, where 3 Senegalese peacekeepers were killed. According to the joint AU-UN mission in Darfur, the mission-trained police unit was escorting a water convoy from El Geneina town in the mission's regional headquarters in West Darfur when it was ambushed by an unidentified armed group. UNAMID's Joint Special Representative Mohammed Ibn Chambers commended the Sudanese army for pursuing the assailants and engaging them in a gunfight which reportedly led to casualties on both sides. And Nigeria has accused Liechtenstein of using legal challenges as a pretext to cling on to 185 million euros stolen from the country by former military leader Sani Abacha, who died 14 years ago. Nigeria has been fighting to recover the money for years, but companies linked to the Abacha family keep on going to court year after year to prevent the funds from being repatriated. Liechtenstein's government spokesman, however, said the country was making efforts to return the money, but a complaint in the European Court of Human Rights brought by companies affected was still pending. Nigeria so far has recovered about $1.3 billion of money that Abacha stole from various European jurisdictions. The Democratic Republic of Congo's President, Joseph Kabila, has pledged to turn recommendations proposed in the 3-week National Dialogue meeting into straight-out policy. Now, the meeting held last month was aimed to find ways of addressing the poor functioning of the state institutions in the DRC and the simmering violence in the eastern end of that country. But as the president embarks on this, many in the country are skeptical that he will implement any of the proposed reforms. CCTV's Susan Mongeli now reports.
President Kabila had called a meeting to find ways of tackling Congo's daunting social, institutional and economic problems. But several members of the opposition stayed away, accusing him of trying to seek a third term in violation of the constitution. And now, as Kabila pledges to embark on implementing recommendations from the National Dialogue, opinion is divided on the success of the talks.
It's about time that the men and women of this country came together around a table to talk about our country, which for a while not only has been through wars as well as numerous crises. They can now come together and talk about the problems that have plunged the country. So it's high time to review all that is not working and find a solution to these problems.
You don't treat a problem by looking at its consequences. We treat a problem by examining its cause. What is the cause of the crisis in the country? That's where we need to start from. Because if we manage to solve the cause of this whole crisis, then I don't think we need to have national dialogues.
According to the presiding committee, restoring institutional legitimacy damaged by the row over Kabila's re-election 2 years ago had been central to the discussions. The recommendations included specific reforms to the National Electoral Commission ahead of presidential elections due in 2016. However, opposition members claimed the talks were a forum for Kabila to boost his legitimacy as he prepares to reform the constitution and seek a third term.
The president has realized that there is a lack of national cohesion. The 5 main issues discussed at the National Dialogue are the same 5 main issues that the government is in charge of handling. National cohesion does not mean accolades or the coming together of the Congolese people. National cohesion comes as a consequence of government that works well together. And if we say that there is no national cohesion, it is because the government is not doing its work.
The National Dialogue was postponed a number of times as delegates quibbled over the value of per diems for attending the conference, and opposition politicians debated whether to participate. DR Congo ranks bottom of the United Nations Human Development Index. Millions of people have died in the east of the country from violence, disease and hunger since the 1990s as insurgent groups fight for control of the region's rich deposits of gold, diamonds and other valuable minerals. Susan Mongeli, CCTV.
Time for another break. Here's what's coming up in business. Somalia's president is calling on Barclays to reverse its decision to close remittance accounts. A court decision is expected on Tuesday. Somalia's head of state, Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud, wants Barclays to reverse its plan to shut down the accounts of small remittance companies to Somalia as the country awaits a UK court decision this Tuesday. In a statement issued late on Monday, the president said the lives of millions of innocent Somalis dependent on that decision, and it was not the time to punish a country that is just recovering from a long and devastating civil war. In his words, and I quote, "We are watching with great concern the events unfolding in London and sincerely hope that Somalis are not made to suffer unnecessarily. Here in Somalia, we have always argued that the innocent millions should not be made to suffer because of the crimes of the guilty few." End of quote. A court in London is expected to rule on whether or not Barclays should close remittance accounts to Somalia in compliance with international regulations. Now, the bank had set the deadline on September 30th, but pushed that to the 15th of October to make room for the court hearing. Elsewhere, the Mo Ibrahim Foundation has, for the fourth time in 7 years, failed to find a suitable winner for the world's most valuable prize. The $5 million prize is awarded to a former head of state in Africa who's found to have been exceptional in providing security, healthcare, education and economic development, and who hands over power to a democratically elected successor. With the details, here's CCTV's Natalie Fury.
The committee, after careful consideration, has determined not to award the 2013 Prize for Excellence in Leadership. Thank you.
This year's decision means the prize for achievement in African leadership has only been awarded 3 out of the 7 years since it was launched. But the members of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation stand by their criteria.
This is for excellence in leadership while head of state, not for performing according to the job. And so, yes, we are not going to lower the bar to it. And I think that if we want to reward excellence in other sectors of society, then people are open to create those awards. There are many foundations in Africa and the world that can do that.
Mo Ibrahim, the Sudanese billionaire who set up his foundation to bring about change in Africa, says a potential winner must inspire others.
It's really to think of the chance to lead a nation as a great honor, a great gift, and to always remember you are there to serve the people before yourself.
But the region has seen progress. The countries where there have been overall improvements in governance are home to 94% of people living in Africa, according to the 2013 Ibrahim Index of African Governance. Health, education and women's rights have shown particular improvement, though there are some major areas of concern, such as the rise in internal conflicts.
That worries us because it's an issue about social cohesion in a society. And we need to understand why this is happening. Is there social exclusion increasing of certain ethnic groups, or is it the widening gap between the haves and the have-nots?
He says now is a time for what he calls African realism, a time to recognise achievements, but also be pragmatic about the continent's challenges. While there may not have been a winner this year, the Mo Ibrahim Foundation says that its index and its recommendations of where improvement is needed, such as in the rule of law, set out a blueprint for the excellence needed for future prize winners. And they're optimistic that in years to come, there will be many more. Natalie Fury, CCTV, London.
Now, South Africa, on the other hand, is moving ahead with legislation to diversify the country's energy supplies. From October 2015, it will be mandatory for all petrol and diesel products to have a 2% biofuel blend. CCTV's Sumitra Naidu has the details.
Sorghum is the most popular cereal crop in South Africa, but it can also be used to make fuel.
The manufacturing of biofuels is based on the extraction of sugar and starch components from plant material, which then goes through a process of fermentation, much like in the case of alcohol production, and through the fermentation process, bioethanols are then produced.
South African farmers are gearing up to harvest up to 5 times the amount of sorghum currently being produced. The raised output will be turned into ethanol to make up a 2% biofuels blend as part of government efforts to diversify the country's energy supplies.
The farmers in South Africa will be able to do it, but I don't foresee that they will produce 750,000 tons in 2015, and I foresee that by 2017 I think we will produce our requirements.
Infrastructure for the biofuels industry is still waiting for a final sign-off from government. Construction of a new refinery is expected to start soon.
South Africa produced 151,000 tons of sorghum this year. But in order to meet government's 2% biofuels inclusion rate by 2015, farmers would need to produce between 500 and 700,000 tons of sorghum annually. As you can see behind me, the farms are now dry. Harvesting has just taken place. Farmers are now waiting for the next rains to start their planting season.
The sorghum harvest is done once a year.
Sorghum grows for about 5 months. So with the first rains we will start planting and the whole process will go on. the sorghum will be finished growing by March, next year March.
More job creation will be in the pipeline as government plans to raise the biofuels content in petrol and diesel by up to 10%.
If you have a large amount of bioethanol being produced in South Africa, you would need to import much less crude oil. However, this is a scenario which would only be realistic in the event that the bioethanol industry moves up to a minimum of 10%.
Biofuels will not necessarily translate into lower costs for consumers, but it will offer them a cleaner, more eco-friendly option. Sumitra Naidu, CCTV, Sasolburg.
Right, quick run through the markets now. Let's have a look at some of the early trading data coming out from Nigeria. The all-share index there in the green, up 0.16 percentage points. The all-share index in South Africa also in green territory, up 0.87%. The Kenyan index, the 20-share index of the Nairobi Securities Exchange, however, is in the green, but only in the red rather, but only marginally so, down 0.07. And the Egyptian market today, of course, being a holiday, really, is closed. On to sports now. On Tuesday, Ghana's Black Stars are to host 7-time African champions Egypt at the Baba Yara Stadium in Kumasi. Ghanaians exuding quite a bit of confidence. Egypt, however, also hoping their fans can have something to cheer about. Egyptian fans in Ghana may not outmatch the thousands in Kumasi today, at least not as far as the numbers are concerned, but they too will hope to have a voice after 90 minutes. On paper, Ghana could really win this tie convincingly, but the record in the recent past against the Pharaohs hasn't been especially spectacular. The Egyptians will be particularly confident of breaching a Ghanaian defence, as the host's high back line should make them quite vulnerable. The Pharaohs are eyeing their first World Cup appearance since the 1990s, and their fans are confident the first leg will certainly go their way.
We have been here for like 8 years myself, and I'm managing a football academy around, and we have been trying to support the Egyptian national team with a lot of logistics and a lot of other stuff, even like a month ago before they arrived to Accra, and we are here now to support morally as well.
We have high hopes for our national team, Egypt, and inshallah, hopefully we can win. It's a very hard game. Most of the Ghana team are, they play for international leagues all over the world. In Egypt, there was no local matches for almost 2 years. So hopefully with the spirit and with the prayer of the 90 million Egyptian, hopefully we can make a good score on the game, inshallah.
Egypt and Ghana has shared a long history of friendship and cooperation. And it's unfortunate that one of these two teams will not show up at the World Cup. But we believe at the end, whatever Egypt or Ghana to win this for Africa, and we are going to support whatever team in Brazil next year.
Now, the second leg of the Ghana versus Egypt World Cup playoff will take place at the Military Stadium, right on the outskirts of Cairo on the 19th of November. Ghana's Minister of Youth and Sports, Elvis Afriye-Ankra, says everything possible will be done to motivate the team to overcome the Egyptian rivals and qualify for their third successive World Cup. He said that when he spoke to CCTV's Nicholas Negoche.
Our preparations has been okay. Government has put in place whatever has to be done, both in Accra and in Kumasi, to ensure that the players are well catered for. The technical team, Coach Kwesi Appiah, management, we've been working together. The team spirit is good. As you can see, we are like a family. There's cohesion, there's collaboration, and the key word is focus. It's very clear to everybody that the situation in Egypt cannot be described as conducive and congenial. Indeed, it's a very volatile situation. And on a daily basis, the situation keeps deteriorating. And we have written to FIFA, and FIFA has rightly written to the Egyptian FA to give us guarantees, and that they'll continue to monitor the situation.
And that is news from Africa in half an hour. Do remember, however, the news never sleeps. You can keep in touch with it on Twitter with our handle at CCTV News Africa and our Facebook page at CCTV Africa. Thanks for watching. I'm Ramanya.